You're listening to the Hella Well with Danielle show, a podcast taking women of color on a journey exploring all things wellness and travel related. We're all about showing you how to put on your oxygen mask first and creating lasting self-care habits that will free you to travel the world and live the life you truly desire, and not one you have to fake loving. I'm your host, Danielle Washington. Now let's buckle up and start this journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Hello Well with Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle Washington. And, have you ever thought, for me, I know I have a strong sense of intuition, but sometimes you can't always tell the difference between intuition and trigger. And this is what happened to me recently. So I wanted to do actually a follow-up to two podcasts ago. So about two podcasts ago, I talked about my love life and lessons in love. And Venus was doing its thing during Venus retrograde and really was showing itself and taught me even a bigger lesson than I thought. And the real lesson that Venus retrograde taught me was I was confusing intuition and triggers. And if you're someone who has a strong sense of intuition, you just feel like, oh, well, that must be my intuition. But oftentimes, it could also be our triggers. And I really wanted to have an episode to help unconfuse the difference between intuition and trigger and how to be able to recognize when you're being triggered and when you are listening to your intuition saying, girl, run, run, run. So if you didn't listen last week's or 2 weeks ago's episode, you don't really need to listen because I'll kind of give you the deal. But just kind of give the summarized Cliff Notes version is I was dating someone and I thought he was the greatest thing in the world. And then I thought he ghosted me after we had sex, but actually that was wrong. He did not, which plays back into where we are today. But Ish went hella wrong real quick, real fast. And to the point where it was embarrassing. I won't lie. I felt triggered or I wasn't sure if it was my intuition or triggered. Again, we'll get back into that part of the conversation. And so I was emotional. I was emotional wreck and I lashed out, which I don't really lash out on people, especially nowadays. But what was more embarrassing is part of it is I even got to the point where I was like begging for someone to come back to me where my intuition was like, girl, this ain't what you want. So how do you go from intuition, knowing your intuition and a trigger? And so the first thing is actually even knowing the difference between intuition and trigger. And that was for me kind of really figuring that out because again, it's so easy to get it confused, especially when you have a strong sense of intuition. So the way I like to think about intuition, the way it's defined is it's something that one knows. It's like, and you know it on the level of it's so deep that it just feels beyond logic. It's instantly felt. It feels definitive. Like you don't even have to overthink of it. There's no overanalyzing or like, is this right or wrong? It's like, I know intuitively, well, it's just not intuitively, but like say intuitively, I know I will never eat a banana because I hate bananas. It's like it feels, it may not be logical. It's not probably the best example. I'll think of something else as I go. But anyway, it feels definitive. You don't have to overthink it. You just kind of, that you know that you know that you know. It's one of those moments like, that you know that you know. It's just, it feels right. It feels comfortable. It's often so strong and so powerful that's why I think a lot of us actually ignore intuition because, like, it's so strong, it's so clear that we're like, "Oh, that can't be true. It's just too clear to be true." And I've been known to kind of fall into that. The one thing I always like to tell people is that also it's never impulsive. You think about it, your intuition is never impulsive. It's never like, "Do this because da 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 da." It doesn't have that impulsive feeling. It keeps you in the present moment. It's proactive, it's not reactive, and that gets back into triggering. Remembering the difference is it's proactive and not reactive. And our intuition literally just helps, it helps us stay in alignment with our core values. And that's why it feels comfortable and just right. And so, with this situation, when I first met this person, my intuition said, like, he's not the one. And it was just kind of like a passing thought. It was just like, he's not the one. And it's kept going on with, the relationship, thinking like, "Oh, well, whatever." That was just a thought that passed through my head, but it just felt comfortable. It felt definitive, and I remember seeing him, like, it was I loved the conversation we were having, but when I first saw him, and even in our first conversations, my thought was, "He's not the one." But I like him, he's cute, I like the conversation, so I kept it going. And then we get into triggers. And I'll explain furthermore on intuition triggers, but triggers, I like to think of them as evidence-based. The things like you're like, and some people call it jumping to conclusions, but it's like you're using evidence to prove something isn't right. You use, I don't know, I guess a lot of people say, you used it to describe sensations, images, experiences that remind you of a memory. It's you jumped in conclusions in a lot of different ways, but it's like usually it's evidence-based. It's like your evidence is guiding me, like, I have proof that this is happening, that this person is lying to me, so therefore it must be true, and it's a quick way to jump to conclusions, as I said before, but you're absolutely convinced that this has to be the truth because you have the evidence to prove it. You're like, "I got the receipts. This has to be true." But oftentimes it may not be true. It may be something that's coming from a past memory. It could be something that's in environment situations. And one thing I love to talk about is that triggers don't always have to be in negative form. And that was one of the things I didn't realize in this situation is one of my triggers isn't a negative. It's not like, oh my God, the world's ending. It's, oh my God, this could be the most amazing thing in the world. And so I like to remind people that triggers aren't always a negative thing because I think we always think, oh, it's trigger. It must be bad. It must be bad. But triggers do pull on your fear and your weak spots. It pulls on, past stories and narratives that we told ourselves, and we project them onto the future like, "Oh my god, this is gonna happen. This is gonna affect my future." And we project these triggers and these emotions, and it is emotional. That's one thing I think about difference between intuition and trigger is hella, hella, hella emotional. Um, and it can feel confusing. You begin to question everything that you're thinking. You're like, was I wrong to say that I don't want to be with this person? What if this happens or what if that happens? And you're overthinking, you're over analyzing constantly. And that's the difference between intuition and trigger. Like when intuition, you're not overthinking it, you're not over analyzing, but in being triggered, you're like thinking over and over. And again, you're looking at the receipts. It's like, okay, this receipt said this, that receipt said that, this has to be right. Being triggered also feels very harsh and restrictive. And that's kind of, again, it's that emotional feeling. And triggers can come in two different forms. They could be internal triggers. They can come from within you, and it could feel, it could be a memory, it could be a physical sensation, it could be an emotion. A trigger could be external situation. It could be a person, a place, a specific situation. So for me, a perfect example of a trigger is don't come up from behind me. Don't surprise me from behind because I will start swinging first, then look next. And that's a trigger for me. And that's a negative form of a trigger for me. I was attacked in when I lived in DC. Someone tried to attack me in my apartment building. Like, yo, literally on my way to work, as I normally did, I was very consistent and left at the same time every day. And like, I literally felt someone come up from behind me and start choking me. And I'm like, oh my God, am I being choked? Oh my God, is this person about trying, like, he was trying to drag me to the ground and he literally was trying to rape me. And so, I eventually got out of the chokehold. Thank you for having a brother who was a jerk and, would wrestle me. And so I was able to quickly get out of the chokehold, but like he was blocking the only way out of the building. So I couldn't go anywhere. Long story short, he punched me in the face, which really sucked. Only time I've been punched in the face. And stole my bag and took off. But from that point on, I have consistently had a trigger. If someone comes up from behind me, it triggers me to think, oh my God, someone is attacking me. And I hate that feeling, and that's why I always tell people, "Don't surprise me from behind, because you may get surprised yourself." But I've recognized that that situation is a trigger. Where I used to live in DC, when I would go towards that, I definitely moved after that situation. I'm like, "I'm out." But once I would kinda go back to that area, I was triggered. And I remember seeing the person in a whole different part of town, again, triggered. And I had PTSD. And I guess I still do because I still have issues. But those are how the memory and the internal trigger works out, as well as the external trigger of being near where I used to live or seeing the actual person who actually tried to attack me on the streets. And of course, shout out to DC police who did nothing still. But that is what it is. But that was years ago. And so that kind of tells you kind of the difference between trigger and intuition. And in my situation, I had this thing where I thought this person was lying. B, I intuitively felt that it wasn't, the right situation and all these different things. And all these different things were coming into play and it got messy. It got real messy identifying again what was my intuition, especially when there were strong feelings and strong emotions, because those strong emotions were being aroused by certain actions by this person, because he was gaslighting a sister. Long story short, gaslighting and lying, and was good at it. Because in my mind, if you especially didn't hear the last episode, I'm like, well, he's a spiritual person, he's on his journey. He's not gonna gaslight me. He's not gonna lie, especially after when I first met him, I was like, please don't lie to me. Like, I am really open about a lot of things. I just need you not to lie to me. And from the jump, I swore he was lying to me. And that's why I was like, let me give him a warning. Don't lie. So again, my intuition was saying one thing, add in strong emotions, and strong emotions were them adding into evidence that led me to a conclusion. And so through the situation, what happened was how do I explain this? Yeah, I'm just gonna give the truth because it is what it is. So this person kept saying over and over and over he was not on the dating app. And I'm just like, dude, okay, Cupid has a little green button, a little green dot that shows when someone's on, once you've matched with someone. And I'm like, are you literally saying that the app is lying every time I see that you're online? He's like, yes, I'm not online. I swear, I swear, I swear. Or the exact words, and this is where I got played. I'm not online talking to people. I'm not online talking to people. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not online talking to people. To the point to where I decided to test this theory. So I unmatched us on OkCupid. I was like, well, he's got to admit either that he noticed I didn't match him or he's going to say silent. So let's see how he plays this. And so a couple days later, he's like, oh, I went to go look at your pictures and I couldn't see anything. Like, did you block me? And I'm like, no, I unmatched us, just because I got tired of, seeing if you were online or not. So just removed, the thing. And then that's when the gaslighting started happening. He's like, "Well, that's really unfortunate you let your trigger, make a decision, that affects the both of us, but, I get it, before I was Buddhist, I I would probably do the same thing, but, I get it, I understand that you were just triggered." And I actually literally laughed in his face. And then he asked me why, and I didn't say why because at the time I was just like, "Oh my god, this is really condescending." But I didn't realize at the time that I was really being gaslit because I was just like, "Oh, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the one in the wrong." But at the same time, I'm like, that was a real condescending moment. So I'm gonna just laugh and kind of keep it to myself. The next morning, I go on OkCupid, and I was like, "Okay, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Let's see." And I can actually found out that you can actually rematch with someone that you unmatch with. Honey, why did I go on this? And because I guess he assumed now that we weren't matched, he had changed his profile from where it used to say monogamous or non-monogamous to monogamous only, and then had updated that he's now open to short-term, long-term, and friends, which that wasn't there. So I'm like, okay, in conversation, you're telling me I'm only into you. I'm not talking to anyone else. I am fully, fully invested. This can be my forever. Like, I feel that there's something special between us. This is it. Wow. So if that was it, why did you need to change your profile? Especially you did it after you were assuming I could never see that whatsoever. So this is when, ha ha ha, trigger came in. I'm like, I was triggered by someone lying because someone lying to me is a trigger. And I'm like, oh no, you lie. You gaslighted me. So I literally wrote him a note the next morning. Because we saw each other the night before. And the next morning, I'm like, you gaslighted me, while lying and all this stuff. I'm like, thanks for the lesson, and left it. And then, I get a message from like, huh, what? Immediately after the huh, what? He removes his profile from OkCupid. Immediately, like literally within minutes. So now, if you didn't know what I was talking about, why would you do that? But again, all of this triggered another trigger. What I didn't realize, and kind of going back to what we talked about before, was not all triggers are bad or negative in negative form. And so I remember, because this happened last week. Last week was rough, kids. Um, I remember having a situation where I waited a day and I was like, okay, well, if he really cared, he's going to reach out. Mm-mm. Didn't call, didn't anything, whatever. It was just like, whatever, what happened? And because he was waiting to see how he was going to play the next lie. And so I write him, I'm like, I'm hurt. I'm deeply hurt. I was really invested. And that was a lie. But again, that was a trigger because I didn't realize that I was already being triggered by something that made me feel like, oh, I'm here. Like I was invested in this relationship and you really hurt me. Ended up having a long blowout conversation because I finally was like, you know what? I'm gonna be like, I wasn't handling this properly. So let me actually have a conversation and actually fully explain to him, this is why I'm out, versus me saying, you know what you did, whatever. And that was a maturity level on my side. But again, so we have a conversation. In the conversation, he's like, you question my integrity. I could never be with someone like you. I'm out. Like, I just can't do this. And he still was like, well, I don't know. I swear on my daughter, I would never, I was not talking to anyone online, he's like, and it shouldn't matter that I changed my profile. And I'm just like, why are you lying to me? But what that triggered was, oh my God, I had the perfect guy and I messed it up. And in my head, the trigger of the relationship that intuitively I knew was that this is the perfect guy. Oh my God, I found my person. And now, oh my God, I've lost my ideal relationship. I must do everything in my power to hold on to it. And why I say that one of my triggers is having this ideal relationship, like I call it my Jake Ryan moment from 16 Candles. Like I'm literally waiting for someone to sit on the table with me and have a cake for me, cake right in front of me. That's like literally one of my like relationship goals. But when I get into certain relationships, I get triggered into, oh my God, this is my Jake Ryan. This is my hopes. And I start talking myself into it. Remind you, when I first saw this person, I was like, intuitively, he's not my person. Intuitively, I knew that he didn't have enough time and wasn't willing to make the time to be with someone like me. And I knew intuitively like, that just wasn't the right person for me. And again, I felt great from the jump about meeting him, but I also just felt like he was also just not an honest person. Intuitively, felt like he wasn't in a space to where he was in the right mindset to have a relationship. But I kept telling myself, "Oh my God, this has to be it. Like we've been crossing paths forever. Oh my God, this has to be it." Like he's okay with, the woo side of me, the spiritual side of me. He sees me as I am. Like I can be just as is. And he accepts me. He wants to elevate me. Like this is it. This is the ideal relationship. And I had to keep talking myself into it to the point where I was kept telling him, I'm like, I'm fully in this. I'm fully in this, when that was a trigger because I wasn't fully in it. Because I always intuitively knew, I was like, this isn't your person. And then when we decided to end things, it triggered me further, and oh my God, I've lost the best thing in my life when I knew intuitively it was not the best thing in my life, but the trigger inside of me, the emotion inside of me, the evidence inside of me, the evidence in front of me, the conclusion I jumped to was I've lost everything. I must now do everything in my power to get this person back. And I won't lie, y'all, it was not pretty. It was not pretty. I wrote this long, dramatic, like, text because, like, we had talked when we last talked, we were like, "This is it. Don't call me. I'm not gonna call you. This is over." And I wrote this long text. I'm like, "Don't get mad at me. I messed up. It was all me. I jumped to conclusions. It looks so clear. Like, I just want you in my life. I highly value you. You are everything to me. Just take me back, even as a friend." And for days, I cried until I was able to realize, wait a second. I think that was a trigger. I think that was a trigger. And when I was able to, again, come back to, oh, this feels confusing. Oh, this feels harsh. Oh, this feels emotional. This feels, physical. It feels emotional. I'm over analyzing it. Those were the signs for me to recognizing this was a trigger and it wasn't my intuition and that it wasn't real. So when I go back and look in the relationship, I was like, okay, what was trigger and what was intuition? Because it was still foggy to me. So when I look at the triggers were that he was lying because he did lie. He is a liar and a gaslighter. Shout out to him. Uh, Trigger was that this is my perfect match. This is my end all everything. This is my Jake Ryan moment. I got my hopes up and I started inventing this wonderful relationship we were going to have when intuitively I knew this was not my guy. And the other trigger that I had was when the situation ended, it triggered me that I've lost my last chance of love. Intuitively, again, I knew from the jump he wasn't my person. And I knew that he wasn't someone who made time or had time to be with someone. And also that again, he's a liar. I say all this to say when you feel triggered or confusing triggered versus intuition, there's some questions you just need to ask yourself. Like, ask yourself, how emotionally charged is the thought or feeling? Like, is the thought or feeling like kind of just like stewing in you, or is it based in emotions? And if it is, it's a good idea to kind of dig deeper to see like, why am I feeling such an emotional reaction? Because again, intuition is not really emotional. It's just kind of like, I know, that you know that you know. You don't have logic behind it. You just know. One thing I've learned for me is that when I can't separate like my emotions from the situation, 9 out of 10, it's a trigger. And that's what I learned from this situation, especially like because when I was really emotionally charged, those are all triggers. I was calm when everything was in my intuition side of it, calm as can be. But when it was triggered, it was like, oh my God. I'm like, I am convinced this person is a horrible person. And I'm convinced that this person's my last chance at love and I have to get him back. Oh God. I part of me hates that I had to learn this lesson because, again, crying, like literally in the middle of the street, just crying my eyes out because I couldn't stop crying because I was like, I lost everything. And it just, when you're triggered, it just feels like something that I was trying to convince myself that I had lost everything, or I was convincing myself when I was in the relationship that this was everything. This was it. Like, you get into it. It's like, go team go. Like, you can do this. Like, even when the sex wasn't that great, I was like, but yeah, you could do this for long term. Like, you can totally do this. And intuitively, I was like, no, sis, this is not your person. Even sexually, he's not your person. The other question to ask yourself is, am I trying to talk myself into something or out of something, you know? And it goes back to me trying to talk myself into, this is it. This is the situation. And when you're trying to talk yourself into something, most likely it is a trigger. But again, investigate further. One of the things I also would bring up is trusting yourself. And that comes into play when you're trying to decipher between intuition and triggers because it all goes into, do you trust your judgment? And I had to ask myself, like, what parts of me are needing what part of me is needing to trust me right now? What part of me is needing to trust me right now? Because I wasn't trusting my intuition. I was trusting the triggers and the evidence because I had receipts. I was like, I had the receipts. So I was trusting the receipts and not my intuition. And I had to ask myself, are you trusting your judgment or unsure if you handled the situation in an unhealthy way? Is this illusion of the person that you want him to be, even after you already has shown you red flags? And I had to, again, go through this process. And once I was able to get to the point of, this is trigger, this is intuition. Oh my God, Venus retrograde right around literally, I think a day or two before Venus went out, ended its retrograde. Is now in the shadow period, but it went out of retrograde. It was like, dun da da da. Welcome to the lesson we needed you to learn. We needed you to learn the difference between intuition and trigger. We needed you to learn how to trust yourself. We needed you to learn that this guy is not for you. He is a gaslighter and he is a liar and a bad liar at that. Well, not so bad because I think he's convincing himself, but it is what it is. So I hope this helps you guys because, again, it gets messy, especially when you're someone who has a strong sense of intuition. You're like, oh, I feel something. Like when you feel something, you're like, oh, this must be my intuition. But I encourage you to, I like to do the stop, drop, and roll. Stop, especially if it feels really emotionally charged. Stop, drop into yourself, start asking some questions, and then roll with what you feel. Like meditation for me got me through this. Meditation, I meditated so much in the last 2 weeks, like my butt kind of hurts because I've been on the ground for a bit. But it really helped me quiet the mind to get into being able to decipher these two things. So I again hope this helps someone because I wish I had this knowledge beforehand. I'm glad that I was able to learn this lesson and it sets me up for showing up differently in a relationship. It sets me up to know because I didn't know that one of my triggers is I have this ideal relationship like trigger. And, someone will trigger like, okay, this is it. He's triggered it. I'm like, it's like a light switch. I'm like, trigger, wonderful. I need to do everything in my possible power to make this fit into the square peg, the square object fit into the circle. And that's what I was doing in these wishes when I get triggered by my ideal match. And I also had to recognize and learn that my trigger is, oh my God, I lost something. I've been abandoned and I need to hold on. And because in past relationships, oh my God, I've done that. I think in any relationship I didn't necessarily end myself or I sabotaged so to end it somehow, some way or another, I would try to hold on. And I would hold on to things I knew were not good for me, that were toxic. Because again, I had this trigger of like, I I can't be abandoned. I'm like, even if it's the worst thing in the world, I must hold on to it. But knowledge is power. When you're able to really listen and be aware of your triggers and things like that of yourself, you're able to show up differently. You're able to recognize signs quicker and you can shift how you move in this world. So notice those triggers, listen to yourself, and know that intuition is never impulsive, is never reactive, it is positive. It's that knowing, it's the instant feeling of just knowing. Whereas triggers emotional, scattered, crazy, overthinking, and can cause a lot of havoc. I love y'all. It is Black History Month. Oh, I forgot to mention that in the beginning. It is Black History Month. I love Black History Month because I'm Black and I'd like to celebrate my people. And in this month, I also wanted to offer everyone a 2-for-1. Like, we need healing. Like, if anything that this period taught me was healing is so important, and being able to tap into my Reiki practice, be able to tap into my meditation, tap into, my yoga practice as well, has really helped me. And so I wanted to offer everyone in the month of February, you don't have to be Black. If you are, kudos, but if you aren't, you can still get this as too. I wanted to offer everyone a 2-for-1. So if you buy one Reiki session with me, you actually get 2 Reiki sessions. So you can book one and you can book another future one for free. So from now to February 28th, the end of February, the end of Black History Month, I just want to honor us by, and especially this like 222, 2, like, sorry, the 2-22 phase, and there's so much power in what's going on between, February 2nd, 2022, as well as February 22nd, 2022, which I will actually be holding a live event on that day online. So I want to make sure I'll give you guys more information soon. But it's called the Sacred Pause. I'm super, super excited about it. More details to come, but it's going to be a powerful moment. And I want to just really tap into the consciousness. And I'm working with my girl, Heather Archer, who is amazing, of Thriving with Heather. And we're going to be doing a combination of sound healing and Reiki. So make sure to look out for more information on that, as well as the promo for Black History. And stay wonderful, because you are worthy of not being gaslit. You're worthy of not being triggered and living the life you truly desire. I love y'all. I'll see you later. Ciao. Thanks for joining us this week on the Hello Well with Danielle show. Make sure to visit our website, hellowellwithdanielle.com, where you can subscribe to our show on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon Music and never miss an episode. Also, you can follow us on social media at Hello Well with Danielle on Facebook and Instagram, and Hello Well Danny on Twitter. And if you hella love the show and got some good nuggets out of it, know that I'm not too proud to ask for you to please leave a rating or review on iTunes so that we can continue to expand our reach and help other women of color. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you next week. Ciao.